Hello, everybody. Joe Moore here, Psychedelics Today, joined by Kyle Buller. We are the co-founders of Psychedelics Today, and we have a fun episode ahead of us. But before we get into that, let's talk about the class, Kyle. So Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists kicks off again September 23. So you get a little less than a month if you want to join up. The course is about 47 hours of material and an excellent foundation for you figuring out where you want to go in the space. It's essentially what we wish we had when we were undergrads, maybe even earlier in some cases. Would have saved us a lot of time and pain. Probably would have helped us figure out where we wanted to be with jobs in the space. Because in 2001, 2, and 3, I knew that I wanted to be a psychedelic therapist, but it was a lot more unattainable then than now.
Oh, so, man, yeah.
It's there's stuff available right now, and people are doing it right now. You don't necessarily have to facilitate sessions to be doing this work. You don't, there's so many ways to be involved. So come check it out. It's made up of core curriculum, theoretical understanding stuff, practical implications, and then a whole mess of master classes from people, expertise in different sub aspects of the field. You can learn more, psychedeliceducationcenter.com or psychedelicstoday.com. Again, it kicks off September 23. It's CE approved. We'd love to have you. Anything else?
We would. No, and just a reminder that there's 2 groups. So there's one at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and then another one that starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So check that out. Yeah, and also just want to pitch, any of the other classes we have up there. We have an Imagination as Revelation course by Johanna Hille, covering Jungian psychology and psychedelics. We have the Shadow class, which pairs really nicely with the Jung class, kind of pair those together. And then also stay tuned. We have some other upcoming classes in the works. I think I mentioned in one of the last intros, we have a ketamine and trauma treatment series coming up. So stay tuned, plug it now so you guys hear it first here.
Great. Cool. So on this episode, we wanted to talk a little bit about some things that have happened in the last week. There's so I guess a great way to start is by talking about Dance Safe. Dance Safe just made a post the other day. They're made up of a team of 4, and I don't even think the whole team is full time. Dance Safe has done incredible work, huge amounts of advocacy and harm reduction work. They've got probably 100,000 followers on Instagram, maybe, and they were feeling burnt out. And they decided to just pause social media operations for self-care purposes. Social media can really burn people. It can really make people's psyches, go for loops, right? Like how many kids are getting bullied via social media? How many adults are?
A lot.
Yeah, right. Like who knew adults could be bullies? So there's, I did, but what are we doing? What's our objective here in this space? Like, why are we even around? Why, ask this of yourself too. Like, why do you want to be here? What's your end goal? For us, it's kind of obvious. And I think we did that in a recent podcast, Kyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so last week we had on Izzy, lawyer with MAPS, essentially working full time on the California bill, the SB 519. And it's, I thought it was a great episode. I thought we got a lot of detail on what's going on with the bill. Izzy is a lawyer, and so he has extra perspective there to share, which is really lovely. Izzy has done a lot of work in the space too, a lot of positive work in the space, in my view. And I think in the view of the psychedelic mainstream culture, and largely, Izzy has done amazing work. And we got pretty beat up, at least on a single Instagram post. And I think what we want to do is kind of read through some of these comments and address these things. We did not engage with them on Instagram. Seemed to me to be a bit of a waste of time to do that. These people seemed not really interested in dialogue.
Yeah, and this is also our medium, right? To be able to podcast, and it might be easier for us to just express maybe our comments here. Exactly. I know I sometimes feel burnt out with social media management and stuff like that. It's just really hard to keep up, and I don't know. Yeah, self-care is important. It's important.
Exactly. So what we want to do is, point out this post. It's on our Instagram. It's from I believe last Friday, right?
August 13th.
August 13th. Oh, it's been out for a while then. So, and this is an edgy thing for us, everybody. So like, I'm uncomfortable talking about this. I'm sure Kyle is a bit uncomfortable too. This is not a fun situation to be involved in, and I'm very on edge about it. So, all right. So yeah, we had Izzy on, and here's the first comment. You think we're ready to dig into that, Kyle?
Yeah.
All right. And I'm not going to name anybody who posted things. Folks can go look this up on their own. So here's the first one. This conversation isn't complete without Carlos Plazola, Decrim Nature, unless Psychedelics Today is willing to admit they are completely for the capitalization of medical tyranny in the entheogenic plant space, and that they want the violation of natural beings' unalienable right to interact with the natural world to have a corporate government approved, good Lord, gatekeeper to exact tolls and fees for them to profit from. Then it would make perfect sense why they don't want to hear from Carlos or want anyone else to hear Carlos. Very convenient to discuss someone's understanding of a situation and not invite them to the discussion. Way easier to control the narrative on Solidarity Friday. Are you seeing the hypocrisy yet? All right, so let's get into this one. The idea that you and I are into medical tyranny is quite laughable. How many times have I told people to grow mushrooms and take control of things for themselves? I'm kind of a confused anarchist, often anarcho-left, often just straight anarcho, and highly critical of establishment and establishment politics.
Mm-hmm.
And we're primarily interested in holotropic breathwork. Like that's a big, well, not primarily, but hugely interested in holotropic breathwork, which no drugs whatsoever. It's your body. Get a high and supply of something. And it's no real regulation on it. So I don't know. I am in support of pharma groups doing research because we need basic research to be done in order for the culture to really adopt these things at scale. Anything come up for you on this one?
Well, I guess something that came up for me when reading this comment, but also other comments I was thinking about to our Solidarity Friday episode, talking about the complexities of, say, pharma and how do we discern truth and et cetera, just with everything that's going on. And some degree, I'm like, oh man, like what type of comments did I state in there? I know we talked about pharma having a positive impact at times. Obviously, it's done a lot of harm to people too. So,
one of my best friends has cystic fibrosis, and there's a brand new drug that came out. He's barely symptomatic anymore.
Wow.
For the last year and a half, like you wouldn't know he had cystic fibrosis. It's insane. So like to say pharma is garbage, it's an ignorant comment.
Yeah. And Western medicine has saved my life.
Right.
Probably wouldn't be here without Western medicine. So I appreciate the medical advancements over the years. But, for anybody that has listened to our show and has really dug into a lot of these episodes, which I'm not too sure if this person has, I mean, we're always kind of talking about, these alternative models. We're also, throwing our opposition at times against just the medical system. We talk about the importance of it and we understand why that's needed. And, also being a therapist, I hear people that really want to take psychedelics in a therapeutic context, a medical context to feel safe. Not everybody is going to, find being in a group or on their own is the environment that they want to be in. So having those models and systems in place is going to be important for diversity of how people want to engage in this. So I think we do a pretty good job in exploring a lot of these different models, and we're not just for the medical route. I mean, we definitely have thrown a lot of opposition there, and I critique the therapy and counseling, field all the time. And it's just, I think there's other models out there that we can explore. So,
it's going to take a lot of models. And I think that's our point. Yeah. Like there's no one size fits all thing. We need real research, in my opinion, Because how many people, Kyle, have you and I met who have done too much ayahuasca and are probably going to continue to do too much ayahuasca, and it's going to probably have pretty serious negative implications for their lives, right?
Yeah, very stabilizing. People kind of go into, again, spiritual emergence or, fall into these processes that is very destabilizing for their life, or they have a really traumatic experience and, they have a really hard time navigating that afterwards and be like, what the hell was that? Right.
Yeah. And, a comment on this first comment too, decriminalized nature is not touching poppies, opium. And as best I can tell, not touching a number of interesting plants like coca or kratom, I think, as well. I'm not 100% on kratom, so sorry, everybody, if I misspoke there, but there's a number of plants that get skipped. I think the peyote topic is rightfully skipped. Like, peyote should be protected before legalization or anything like that. And we need to get the natural stores way back up so nobody has access issues, especially NAC folks. Native American Church, for those who aren't in the loop. So I think we beat that one pretty good there. And the next one, because this is not an individual, I'll name them. It's Decriminalize Nature Portland. I assume Portland, Oregon. Decrim Nature needs to be present and able to speak for this discussion. Discussing SB 519 without the input of grassroots movements who made this movement possible in the first place is a surefire way to make sure the corporate profiteering driving this bill behind the scenes stays hidden in the shadows. So I think we have to break this one up into segments because there's a lot here. Decriminalized Nature can speak and be present around SB 519. I think they have been quite vocal. There seems to be a underlying thing here in this particular comment suggesting that we need to have Decrim Nature on the show. Doesn't it speak volumes that we haven't had them on the show in a long time?
But we have had
Larry
on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You go back in the backlog. We had Larry on a while ago.
Mm-hmm. And there seems to be an implication here suggesting that Decrim Nature is the one that got SB 519 started. Perhaps, but is Decrim Nature the group that's going to convince politicians to do stuff? Perhaps at the local level, perhaps at the state level. I really doubtful at the federal level. Yeah.
Well, I guess on that local level, I mean, we do, I think I might have mentioned this in the past, but yeah, I mean, definitely giving props to them for getting a lot of those local initiatives started. I mean, they have had an impact on, helping with the decriminalization of entheogenic medicines throughout the country. So, they are having an impact, and we're not saying that they aren't, right?
Exactly. Like Ann Arbor, great success. Cambridge,
yeah.
Northampton, Mass, great success. Same with Oakland, great success. Of course, I'm going to have critiques everywhere because, what was I born for other than to critique things? But, here, this line by DN, by us not letting DN on our platform, we're allowing corporate profiteers to stay hidden in the shadows. I'm like, well, you don't need our platform. There's a lot of platforms out there. I'm sure you're welcome on at least a couple. Yeah. Any more on this one?
Well, I mean, it's just interesting to say that we haven't had, like, again, those grassroots activists on. We've had many, many people on the show that don't have a platform or a voice, but also just, I guess, like critiquing this episode with Ismail that, were we supposed to have, a bunch of other people on the show as well? And I feel like that's like what that comment is getting at. It's like, wait, like you just can't have one person on the show. You need to have like these multiple perspectives. And yeah, maybe we could have planned that, but it's not how we planned that episode, right? Maybe in the future, we've talked about maybe putting some sort of panel together to have these conversations, but this was just something that we wanted to explore, SB 519. And I think what really kind of started that was you came across the video of him speaking, and we were like, hey, let's get him on the show to talk about this and his experience with going there and advocating. So
right, as he was in front of state government giving really compelling personal testimony, and then hung out, I think, for many more hours talking to these folks. So that's what kind of sold me. Yeah. We've had, we still pride ourselves on picking people who are not, big names in the space quite often. We try to pick the smallest people possible in the space to raise these unknown voices and to, I think, highlight a lot of the unseen complexity in the landscape. Because, it's really simple for MAPS to talk about PTSD and MDMA. It's, it's less easy for them to talk about all of the issues in the space. And that's kind of what we're here for. We want to really discuss a lot of this stuff and help people have a more holistic understanding of all the parts in this space and how they're operating together. Right.
Yeah.
And, we aren't for monopolization. Compass Pathways is the prime example of what's going on here in the space that we dislike. It's an attempt to block all other groups of people from doing this work. And, Christian Angermeyer had a few comments in some leaked emails that were really ugly, saying we're going to be able to dominate this space through IP. Those are the people we should be watching. Watching Joe and Kyle at Psychedelics today is a little goofy when you could go after people who are actively making moves that have been outed in the media that are very much unfriendly to our work as a whole. And of course, I think people should be able to buy whatever plants they want and do whatever, grow whatever plants they want at whatever quantity they want. Like the fact that there's a limit on how much cannabis you can grow at home is cartoonish to me.
Yeah.
I understand why governments did it. It's a next practical step. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of complexity around mushroom growing in the future. Like how many mushrooms can you grow? Like how many tubs or bags or whatever can you use? There's going to be a lot of interesting conversations there. Of course, I want total liberty for folks, but I also understand we have to look at what's practical before we look at what the ideal is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I get that like whole argument around like limits and, not wanting it. And I think, one of the arguments was that, it boosts arrests and, we could look at decriminalization and limits and look at New York City, for example, with their whole stop and frisk policy. And I think I brought this up in a previous episode. Cannabis was decriminalized there for a bit, and how many marginalized communities were still getting arrested for cannabis possession. And it was a civil citation or something like that for anything under an ounce. But people were still, getting ticketed and arrested for that, even though it was decriminalized. So decriminalization doesn't always mean legalization.
This bill is like explicitly legalization. And it's a very different situation than we've been told, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, I want to jump to the next one here. This is actually by one of the two founders of Decriminalize Nature, Carlos. So Carlos says, hello, friends at Psychedelics Today. I am the chair and co-founder of Decriminalize Nature. Dr. Larry Norris, aka PhD, another co-founder, and I would be happy to come onto your podcast and give you our version of what's happening. We'll link the threads of how New Approach PAC, led by Graham Boyd, Sean Parker of Facebook, and funded by Miracle Grow, as in Roundup, and Privateer Holdings, in which Peter Thiel is invested, created the corporate cannabis known as 64, Prop 64, which pushed out the small mom and pop shops in California, despite efforts of good-hearted people to advance more people-friendly legislation that was overrun by Parker and Boyd. We'll connect the threads of how these are the same players pushing limits in California's SB 519, misinforming the public that the limits were necessary to pass the bill. In Carlos' opinion, they were not. Meanwhile, in Oregon, they're the very same group pushing limits in the recent decrim bill being discussed, even though no one is asking for limits. So many other threads to connect for your listeners that we're happy to share. And we'll explain in detail why setting limits is so important for creating scarcity in order to create greater profits for corporate investors. Hashtag knowledge is power. It's real nice. Okay, so I've never seen any articles laid out on this. Have you seen anything about that group of people and that pack, like Miracle Grow and Peter Thiel and stuff, influencing SB 519? Like I've seen zero data on this.
I haven't. But I haven't seen anything in the mainstream or any of the news outlets that I follow. But, I don't know what type of information people on the ground know, right? I mean, we kind of know that there is information that spreads that isn't always publicized. So,
right. I would be happy to read things. I'm not that excited to have Carlos on the show just for him to lay it out. I would, be happy to read any information Carlos is willing to send over. Support at psychedelicstoday.com. Carlos, if you want to mail that over. Yeah. So this is a tough one. Carlos makes some serious allegations here, but I've not been aware of any of this. I've not seen it substantiated in any journalistic outfit, even, non-journalistic blogs. I've not seen it laid out. Like, I would need to see pretty good documentation before I believed it. Like, I have no doubt, there's no doubt in my mind that big industry was manipulating cannabis policy in California. Like, it only makes sense that they would, right?
Yeah.
Possession limits. I don't know. Like I get it, but I also doubt that a lot of these folks would have passed a bill without limits. I think it is a practical step, a political practical step. I'm totally game if we want to do no limits, great, but I don't think that's going to pass. And I've seen no polling. I've seen no references that this isn't necessary, and it seems like a fair step. I could see there being some issues with ayahuasqueros, carrying like multiple gallons of ayahuasca. That could be complicated and impacted here, but perhaps, we can move on to religious exemptions shortly after this bill passes. Religious exemptions that'll be way outside the scope of possession limits and even this bill, right? Like, it should be totally legal in a religious context.
Yeah.
So, point being, I'm willing to read some information. I'm not necessarily willing to give somebody air, just off the cuff. Yeah. I've noticed bad behavior from Carlos, and I'm not necessarily willing to engage with Carlos without good evidence and a good reason. So provide me a good reason, provide me with a little bit of reason to trust you, and perhaps we can do that. I'm not totally opposed. I'm just, as of right now, I'm not game. And, I'm sorry to say it like that, but it's kind of just where I'm at. So Carlos, send us some information. Maybe we can build some trust and build a relationship, and we can go forward. I used to really like Larry, but some of the behavior I've experienced from them, personally in the last year or two, just not very appealing. Doesn't make me want to have a relationship with them. This is kind of, basics of being human, guys. So if you want to be friendly with somebody and have a relationship with them, build a relationship and see where you can start with trust. Yeah. But, there's people out there who I've heard a lot of things about who I'm not going to develop a relationship with because I've heard too many rumors from too many people. I don't think Carlos and Larry, you're there yet, or you'll even get there forever. But, I'd love to have some sort of collaborative relationship with you. So let's see what you can do. So first off, send over some information. We'll read through it and see what we want to do from there. So Decriminalize Nature Ann Arbor comments on Carlos's post. We definitely support having Decrim Nature on the show. Yeah. And share the info they gathered. Great. This is a tough one, man. It's like a really difficult spot for us to be in. It's like we want them to succeed, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been rooting for them, and it's like I said, like it's been really awesome to see a lot of movement in the field, seeing these initiatives getting passed. So I mean, props. This has been amazing. I know I've been celebrating all the wins whenever a new town decriminalizes plant medicines. It's been amazing. And again, like we've had Larry on in the past with Veronica to talk about decrim. And I think like, I don't know, I'm just even thinking about these comments and just like how some of them felt a little aggressive. And it's like, sometimes, we like when we're getting people on the show, sometimes people email us, they'll pitch ideas, we try to follow up with that. but like, I don't think we've really heard from them, unless they kind of got lost in our podcasting scheduling process. Maybe things got lost as, we were bringing staff on and trying to refine our submission process for podcast guests. But sometimes a simple ask that could have been a little bit more appropriate than this, again, that would definitely boost, relationship building there at times, right? Instead of kind of coming into
to fill this in a little bit, Kyle, like it felt like we were getting hit by a organized goon squad on our post.
Yeah.
For people who don't, if we're not being explicit enough, that's why we're dedicating a whole episode to commentary from DN and DN groups. Yeah. So trying to shame somebody into including you via, hate on Instagram comments isn't necessarily the best way forward.
No.
Or to get us, do we negotiate with comment?
Yeah, it feels like bullying,
trolls.
right? Like if somebody's going to bully you, are you going to be engaging into a conversation instead of like approaching that person and just wanting to engage? Much different approach, right? I know when I feel like I'm getting bullied, why am I going to spend my time engaging in that? And
I think I deleted one comment explicitly on this whole thing. I left the rest of them because there was some commentary about us being racist. Not really game for that kind of thing. So, do what you will with that, folks. The next one here, in response to Carlos, all of this, nothing less, to suggest that they are doing something different in Oregon is really deflecting the truth, what the motives really are, and how they are really pushing for the opposite of what everyone in the psychedelic community has been pushing. Confused by all that. I don't really follow or get it.
I think
yes, of course, there's money to be made in Oregon, but far less than people really think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the way that I hear that is that, there's different motives in Oregon, and legalization isn't, I guess, like what everybody wants. And this whole decrim thing. But I don't know, to start this off, like, what did you get really excited about? When I first started getting into a lot of this, I was really excited about MAPS. And MAPS was pushing the medical model, right? I mean, that was their path forward. There were a lot of MAPS really paved the way for a lot of this stuff to some degree, right? And also,
I'm endlessly grateful to MAPS.
Yeah.
And Rick.
Yeah. And of course, all the other research, right? Like, Strassman's early research, kicking things off, things that happened at Hopkins, that all definitely played a role. But, whenever I was chatting with people, like within this quote unquote community early on, it was, we were all excited about the research and excited that these could be medicines at some point for people to heal and have access to. So again, there's different models I would love to see, outside the medical model. But when I think about like, how did I fall into this field and what was I really supporting early on and thinking about, it was my exposure to MAPS and the early research. And that got me super excited and wanted to play a role in it.
Same here. And my early exposure was Groff, and like Czech psychiatrist, lived through colonization and domination by Soviets and Nazis. Very different. And I was really excited by the stories coming out of medical stuff, right? Like this is not, and then the shamanism and everything else came later, right? So, even my interest in esotericism and mysticism came after my interest in medical psychedelics. So, we didn't even finish this comment here. So, deep pockets and puppets. So I think they're calling us puppets. Profiteers and snakes. Know who the players are, where they're coming from, and what their intentions are. More people need to speak up. Great. Yeah. Like I don't totally follow, but like, of course, if we want to understand a situation, understand all the players and what their motives are. Totally. Like, why not?
And there are a lot of kind of like shady people getting involved now, and a lot of people that are just looking at the profit aspects of psychedelics. I don't know how many times I've heard it's a multi-billion or trillion-dollar industry, right? And when I think most people hear that, they go, "Ooh, I want a slice of that. I want a part of that." So, to some degree, okay, you have a point there. There are a lot of people kind of getting excited about it and want that piece of the pie. So
next up here. This is such an important topic to be discussing. I think having Carlos and Larry on the podcast is a great idea. It is crucial to the progress of this movement to be aligned with people and the earth. So there seems to be a suggestion here that we are not aligned with the people and the earth. It's interesting. I tend to think I am. I think a lot about scale. Like, is there enough ayahuasca to feed it to everybody in the world to change minds like the way a lot of folks want to do? I don't think so. What scales is mushrooms and LSD. And LSD probably even more so than mushrooms. And, this comment about the earth. Yes, earth is in trouble. Absolutely. We talk about it probably too much on the podcast because this is psychedelics today, not climate change today. And yeah, like we're in deep shit. And I believe the medical model is going to play a really important role in helping us weather this horrifying storm. It's going to impact a huge portion of the population. And perhaps could slap us in the face enough so that we make some drastic changes so the impacts aren't as severe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So next one here. Yes, please, Carlos. Next one is a bunch of hearts. I think that means they liked it. So here's another good one. Decriminalizing with limits is an oxymoron. Super cute, though. I disagree that decriminalization with limits is a oxymoron. That's like saying good is evil, which, from a non-dual point of view, some of you probably believe there's some truth there, because that's all really confusing and ridiculous. But, I don't know. Like, it's a game changer to be able to carry multiple grams of DMT around. It's a game changer to be carrying like that much MDMA around. Like the limits are big.
Yeah, I remember going through it. I'm like, man, why would one person need all that?
Even a business, like even an operation shouldn't need that much. It's unbelievable. And there's, so many loopholes I can think of. If you wanted to, you could think of so many loopholes to help you carry more. Like I don't believe limits are that big of a deal. I'm okay with only having like 300 hits of acid at home. Like that's probably plenty. Like I don't know if that's how much they say.
No, it's probably less than
we're supposed to be able to have. Yeah, but it's it's greater than 10, and that's pretty good for most people. That should get most people through a year. Most people. But it does make the manufacture a little complicated. There is a little bit of illegality in the manufacture of that kind of quantity of LSD.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're making that much LSD, you're probably going to be making at least a quarter gram, probably multiple grams at the end of your process. And that's going to be a little complicated.
Or just even thinking about like different, mushrooms. Sometimes you just end up with a bunch, right? You're like, whoa, what am I doing with all this stuff now? If you have like multiple flushes and I guess you could probably easy go over. I forget what the limits are, but yeah.
Yeah. As a grower, you can easily go over those limits. Totally. So I get it. Like that's an issue. But imagine getting arrested for an eighth of mushrooms, or imagine the cops finding an eighth of mushrooms on you and letting you keep it, very different scenarios. Next step here, profiteers that monopolize healthcare, ... They are not for the people, sovereignty, nor healing the past. Like, healthcare is just that, a healthcare system. Well, maybe sick care is more appropriate. Like you get sick and you go get treated. And, broken bone, cancer, your bladder doesn't work, mammogram, colonoscopies, etc. Like these things, you want your doctor to be really good at being a doctor, right? Like I don't necessarily, I would prefer to have the best doctor, not necessarily somebody who's holistically informed and aware of all of the issues that I'm aware of. I would rather they hone their craft in because, issues from medical treatments can be really severe downstream. But there are profiteers that do kind of dominate healthcare. Like there's some really weird conflicts between hospitals and insurance companies. And like, why would an IV bag be selling for hundreds of dollars when you can manufacture them for like $1 or $2? Yeah. So there's a lot there. And of course we need healthcare reform, like no doubt.
Yeah.
And I don't know the way forward with it, but we need to keep on it and like try to get healthcare looking healthy again in the US.
Yeah, it's really not. And it is an issue.
No, it's an ugly scene. I've had a lot of problems with healthcare myself. You probably as well. Like it's not a great scene.
Yeah.
The amount of money I've spent in the last 2 years, more like 5 years, out of control. The amount of money we've spent trying to deal with my partner's post-COVID syndrome, unbelievable. The amount of suffering, unbelievable. And there's no hope in sight. Yeah. So continuing on this comment, we need to fully decriminalize to get out of the colonial capitalist modalities of healthcare and back to the sacred. And this is a joke. So suggesting that we need no possession limits, no manufacturer growth limits in order to get out of the colonial capitalist modalities of healthcare. I have my doubts there. Like, just because you can hold 7 grams or like, a couple kilos of DMT or like, 50 pounds of ayahuasca, like, I don't think, like, from a certain frame, I can understand where they're coming from. If ayahuasca heals everything, which I don't think it does, then perhaps that's true. I would need to see a lot of evidence, but from a particular, human rights perspective, I kind of get what they're saying. But I'm like, we're trying to. It seems to me to be an immature understanding of how politics in America works. Like, it seems like these would be the people, taking pitchforks and guns to the state house to like do a revolution, but instead they're doing Instagram comments. And I get it. It's probably not a good idea to do violence, but this is like the vibe I'm getting. They're really, really angry. They want total revolution. Do you get total revolution through Instagram activism? Probably not. Like, Nestle is still draining lakes. like oil companies are still getting government subsidies in 2021. Like, and you're worried about like this particular small issue, like to this degree. It just seems inappropriate. Like the level of focus they're putting on things.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's where their energy is at, right? Like, kind of fully in this topic, right? I mean, we're fighting for that. We're not necessarily fighting to stop Nestle, right? So I guess it's where we where we place our priorities in life. But yeah, I mean, I would love for things to be fully decriminalized, legalized, and be able to, just again, have a lot of these different models. And I always come back to Dr. Teta's podcast that I did with him, just changing that frame from healthcare to human care. It's like, it'd be awesome to get back to that, back to really serving the human instead of just like this profiteering healthcare system that we're stuck in. I don't think anybody likes it, like we all, I think even those that are in it don't like it.
How many doctors do you know that are upset with what they're forced to do? Like, a lot of them.
A lot.
And there's all sorts of reasons. It's a really complex scenario that they're dealing with.
Yeah. I remember I was chatting to a psychiatry fellow at my work like years and years ago. And I was just asking him, how'd you get into this? And he just said he fell into psychiatry during his residency. He's like, I'm not too pumped about it. He's like, but I don't know what to do. Like, now I've taken on all this like student loan debt, and psychiatry doesn't have that great of tools. Like, ADHD medications are really great for that. But other than that, like, this job, I'm not really too thrilled about the career that I picked. I was like, ugh, damn. And yeah, too, like I've butted up against certain things just in mental health care of like, insurance, out of pocket expenses, this and that, it's, I think a lot of people get into these fields because we want to help. And then, we are kind of confronted with the shitty systems that are in place. And we do need a systems reform. What does that look like? I don't know.
Did you see that film SLC Punk years ago?
No.
It's like a really interesting story of some punk rockers in Salt Lake City, kind of trying to change it by being punk, right? And spoiler, everybody close your ears. Spoiler alert, spoiler. One of them becomes a lawyer at the end because it's like changing from inside the system is a lot easier than fighting it.
Right.
But we regularly talk about, maybe the move is to create a new system that doesn't require permission or anything from the other system and make it a more attractive thing than the existing one. And this is a Bucky Fuller deal.
Yeah.
It's like, where are we wasting our bullets? Are we wasting our energy? Perhaps.
And could that be the argument for decrim nature, right? Just creating a totally different system and wanting to, do something different than not, I guess, like adapt to, okay, the medical model and research is happening, so let's put focus there of like, no, them feeling really, really passionate about this decrim movement, creating new societal structures and structures around this.
Right. Like perhaps some sort of, it takes a few $1 million to start a religion to make it work. Like perhaps that was, better use of dollars spent, but they know better than me. They're in the trenches. So maybe. So next comment here. I've spoken with Izzy at length. Lying shill. Shill, for those who don't know, you say things for money. And next up, this is good. It's a nice attack on us. Well, psychedelics today, it's pretty obvious that the general consensus is that you're screwing the pooch here. Don't think so. Care to respond to anyone? Yep, we're doing it now. And let us know whether or not DN will be included. That depends on how DN approaches us in the next few weeks. Otherwise, it's just propaganda from white billionaires. I wish I was a billionaire. I'm not. Literally. In their paid shill. And you should be deeply ashamed. Like, I recently got healthcare. Like, I went a long time without healthcare. I'm really sick. I'm putting myself out on a limb to do all this work. I don't believe I'm receiving money from billionaires currently.
I don't think so.
Though I'm open to it. I'm still going to stay principled and keep my integrity because that's all I really have. All we really have is our reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see attacks like this, it just doesn't really make me want to engage with any of these people.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, especially thinking about like all the sacrifices like we've made over the years. Some days I'm like, yeah, I know we've talked about it. I'm like, all right, I'm done here. I'm going to move on and do something else because like, all right, like I've sacrificed a lot because I feel really passionate about what we're doing here. Right. Mm-hmm. And, really kind of struggling to make it and, not making a lot of money with this project. And, hopefully that changes. And I know things have changed recently with like course sales and et cetera. And that helps us out to survive, get health insurance. Yeah. I just got health insurance too.
Right. Like I recently had to swap out my car because I ended up with multiple transmission replacements. I'm like, okay, the last repair bill, $6,500. Like, how am I going to afford to live? Like when I get a bill like that and I'm not making enough, I eventually had to swap out the car because I didn't trust that it was not going to happen again. It's even more expense. So yeah, it's a tough scene, especially when my primary partner in life is also really sick and spent a lot of time not working through pandemic. It's been, really ugly and really painful. Yeah. I've, totally passed up on my software career. Like I don't know that I'll be able to go back to software, kind of burned the bridge in a lot of ways so that I could really commit here and help to the greatest degree I can.
And that was like a huge thing for you to make that transition. Like
I was making a ton of money in software, not anymore. It's all gone. Yeah, I don't know what to do about it. Yeah, 20-year software career to just walk away from it to do this, which I think is more of a service than like we're not cleaning up currently. We could be, we might be, but we're not. And you and I are just trying to do this with as much integrity as possible. So it feels cartoonish when somebody comes at us with a comment like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess to also just say that we're making bank, I moved home from Vermont and moved back with family to focus on grad school in this project. And that was a huge thing. But, I was like outweighing the potential there. And I said, this is what I feel really passionate about. And it's also taken a huge sacrifice of my mental health. If anybody, lives with family and then COVID, right? It's like, right. Or Isabel was like, all right, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Boom, COVID hit. I'm like, oh man. Yeah.
So next up here, let's listen to the organization that is helping to create the same disaster with entheogens that weed maps and large moneyed interests created in their corporate regulatory capture of cannabis. What Maps and Bronner's did behind closed doors to 519 in order to create a two-tiered system where they can generate endless profit. And it's not endless profit. And marginalized people get arrested is unconscionable and reveal the true profit incentive. F Maps, F Bronner, and F their pack. I don't really know what's being said here. So if they're comparing us to weed maps, it's cool, like whatever. So it's hinting back that there's information that Carlos and Larry have that hasn't been outed yet about Maps, Bronners, and everybody else. Like I would love to read it, send it over, we'll dig in. If there's something there, cool. Like maybe we'll dig in. But we have to see it before we can make any judgments. Next comment here. It's in response to that last one. You are amazing. All of this is true. You're amazing. My partner occasionally comes to your DV survivor support group. I don't know what that is. I'll keep moving on. Next up, Decriminalize Florida. If y'all have any journalistic integrity and standards, you would bring on Decriminalize. Stop playing. We've already addressed that. I think we have integrity. I don't always think of us as journalists, Kyle. I think of us more as like op-ed commentators.
Right. Yeah.
I think when we do written pieces from other folks, we try to treat it like either an explicit op-ed or an explicit journalism.
Yeah, it's like interesting now with like, the technology that we have with like podcasting, social media. Like I don't have any sort of training or expertise in journalism, even though this feels very journalistic at times of like, going over different news stories, having commentary about what's going on. We're not always doing journalistic investigation.
We're not trying to bring both sides to the table all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's never been us.
Yeah. Right. And most of the time it's just been interviews, right? Like we're just interviewing people. And since we started this series, we've been, putting more of us into these episodes and having commentary, just kind of like, sharing what's on our mind about these topics. Yeah.
Instagram account follows up Bay Staters. It says also have us on. Decriminate Seattle. Says Carlos has a lot of great information to share and a truly decolonized perspective that is very necessary in this growing world. Yeah, show me. And next up, they say they agree and they'd love to hear a perspective from Carlos. Cool. Next up, get Carlos, Larry, and Deanne. Get some solid words on there from brothers who know and have been working hard on these understandings and make sacred teachings for all to make their way with their consciousness and not let rich folk control the sacred. So next up here, you guys should really be putting DN front and center. This is a person who made a lot of comments and some hateful stuff about us. You should really be putting DN front and center as they speak for the people. Sure. MAPS has become a purely profit-driven organization funded by rich white men. And they act like it. Leaving DN out of this is a travesty. This kind of rhetoric isn't how you get involved in a conversation. And there's been, they say it's been funded by rich white men. It's partly true. It's also been funded by rich white women and many grassroots donors. MAPS has raised $150 million over the course of its career, probably more now. And it's a nonprofit, and it's a very explicit mission. The mission, as far as I can tell, Kyle, hasn't really changed, right? It's to deliver as much MDMA assisted psychotherapy as they can, get it approved, and then deliver it.
Yeah.
It's nothing novel, like nothing's changed. And why is an MDMA organization, why does that have anything to do with decriminalized nature?
Right.
Unless things that humans create are part of nature.
Yeah, well, I think maybe because the MAPS has been, solely focusing on MDMA, but I mean, if you think about, the name of that Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, where they were focusing on, the variety of psychedelics and highlighting the different research. But yeah, I think they've really kind of niched down and found one psychedelic, if you want to call it a psychedelic, and a pathogen
right.
to focus on, to deliver as a therapy. So,
I guess there is cannabis research going on too, which how many other nonprofits were funding this stuff the way MAPS is? Not very many. But, they are starting to play in the same pool, right? Like SB 519 and advocacy there. So some of the MAPS dollars are going there. So maybe that's a little messy. I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. It doesn't seem like a problem to me. I like Rick. I like what MAPS is doing. Of course, I have some critiques of MAPS, but this isn't the time for that. And so I think that's the extent of all the comments. Do you think we hit them all?
I think so.
There's a number of other really rude things that it looks like other people deleted. Like I only deleted one comment and everything else looks like it's still there. But this is like a really hard thing for us to get beat up in a public way like this. I sent it to a few friends to go, hey, check out what's going on. I'm like, wow, you guys really did something there. And doesn't look good. Like it's not a good look for organizations like this to try to get attention through these means. If you guys want to talk, let's try to talk and have a relationship. Otherwise, I don't know that we can have a relationship. I've heard a lot of stories about bad behavior from Decriminature. I've had bad experiences, multiple with Decriminature people. And honestly, I'm more philosophically aligned with Carl Hart, which is calling out decriminalized nature as doing mental gymnastics to support their drugs of choice. And I want to see black men and women out of prison. I want to see people of color no longer victims of the drug war. Like this recent person that went to jail for I think it was a life sentence for a single gram joint. But I also see that we want people to be healed. Like psychedelics can help people improve their lives and, get better relationships. It certainly has helped me. So what's the way to do that? Is it like total kind of anarchy? Is it like, let's usurp the medical system? Which it seems like DN wants to play outside the scope of the medical infrastructure. Fine, let them do that. It's just I'm on a different track. I don't think it's going to scale well unless the science and everything's done appropriately so that it can then be included in insurance companies and, the VA and all this other stuff. I don't think we're getting single payer healthcare anytime soon here. So like, insurance companies are still going to have to be a part of the conversation, and it's still TBD if even the MAPS protocol will be covered. Right.
Well, I guess that maybe part of like decrim and just thinking about like more community healing, being able to open up outside of that, not having to charge like a ridiculous amount of money, have more kind of like community co-op oriented healing centers. Maybe that feels like that could open the door if things were decriminalized and people not having to go through the medical system of, going to your community sit where, you're developing community and without the fear that you're going to get arrested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like a really interesting topic to be discussing. I see Omar Thomas at Diaspora Psychedelic Society being a really great model for doing really good work and making an impact now by making this stuff available to Jamaicans at an affordable rate, if not free, charging white folks and then funding your project through those profits. And, it's really appropriate to be helping people who are poor and downtrodden, who have legal access right now to this stuff. And Jamaica's hurting. Like Jamaica has been hurting for a long, long, long time, vassal state of, the British Empire. Colony, slaves, all this stuff. And, the indigenous population is effectively extinct there. Like there might be a few pockets of it, but these people need help. They've been bankrupt. Like the country has been really hosed by the international monetary infrastructure. And it takes a toll when you can't see your country improve. And the only way to see it improve is by selling it off to corporations like hotels and resorts. And it's got to be really disheartening.
Yeah.
And it's partly because the country is essentially getting blackmailed and was heavily manipulated. So why not serve that population? Because it's available right now. We don't need to screw around with politicians. The Jamaican government seems to be on board. And like Omar has a lot of contacts at the Jamaican federal government level. And he's really making change, I think, and trying to help those people who are most downtrodden by allowing people with means to get treated and then funding the other stuff. Permaculture infrastructure. Do you need a super modern house, or is there a way to do some sort of alternate build that's really durable in a tropical climate, where you're probably going to get a hurricane every 10 years at least, probably a greater frequency soon. But yeah, like how do we plan for the future and how do we heal people right now? We can do that in Jamaica. So check out Diaspora Psychedelic Society, folks. Like I'm really aligned with that group. I really like Omar as an individual. Just excited to see what happens.
Yeah.
So how did we do, Kyle, covering all this fun stuff?
It's definitely challenging, right? It's a challenging conversation to have. And I could imagine that there's some people that are listening that, may have been following that, probably could be critiquing us that we didn't have anybody from DN on right now to, talk about it. And again, like we just wanted to really address these comments. If, we feel that we're able to do that in the future, yeah, happy to. I'm happy to try to do something there. But, we just wanted to really address it. But yeah, just thinking about like the work that we've been doing, I feel like too, it's been a weird few years too, like with COVID, everything, lockdowns. I know my mental health has tanked a few times here and there, definitely throughout the past 2 years or so.
Totally.
And it's just really important for us to like, take care of ourselves and just how sucked in this digital space, like many of us have probably become because it's been our only outlet, and how much that we are projecting and from our internal psyche to externally because of the collective, and it's tough. So seeing a lot of that stuff definitely was pretty rattling to us and the team and whatnot. And just thinking like, I guess some of the stuff that was really coming up as I was reading some of it is like, how closely are some of these folks following us? Are they listening to the podcast? Are they seeing who we're having on? And to say that, we're just like, corporate sellout and we're just like only having people on that are supporting that mission, it just made me scratch my head and go through our backlog. We've had a lot of, we haven't had Rick Dobland on. We've had people from Maps on, haven't had Rick on yet. We haven't had, Michael Pollan on. We haven't had, whoever else is really popular in the space on. Mm-hmm. And, we would love to eventually, but again, going back to like our mission when we kind of first started this was we want to get other voices out there. We want to hear what's going on just in the psychedelic world, not just the same old like updates and narrative. I'm more curious and how are people approaching this in different ways? So a lot of young researchers that we have had people that are more grassroots doing work in the field. We can't get everybody. I mean, that would include us doing probably a couple episodes every day to really, follow every single person, every single activist in the field. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy. Like Joe and I are only two people. We have a very small team here. We're working on multiple different things. We need to keep this project alive. And we need to wear multiple hats. We need to kind of allocate our time in different ways to keep this sustainable on our end, to keep moving forward. So, I don't know, just a little bit of some thoughts there.
Yeah. And, is it okay for you and I to have boundaries, Kyle?
Yeah. Boundaries is very important in a field that is sometimes boundaryless and ego dissolving. It's really important to have boundaries.
We can make our life a lot better by cutting the riffraff out of our lives. I think that's one of the primary reasons why in positive psychology, they find that really old folks tend to be a lot happier than folks in their 30s and 40s. They no longer have these really problematic and stressful relationships. And I've been working on that myself. Like, how can I live a better life? Let's cut some of the fat out. Like, there's no reason I need to be everybody's therapist. They can go find one.
Yeah.
I need to take care of me first so I can be healthy again. Big news on that later, but big wins last week. So we can do that in another time. But people need to be healthy. People need to take care of themselves. And this is us partly taking care of ourselves. I want to talk to people who I trust, who I think have integrity, and who I think are doing really interesting, cool, and positive things.
Yeah.
And again, I want DN to win. I want DN to be successful. I also want DN, and I've said this many times on the show, to figure out how to have better relationships in the space, because I hear that's one of their fundamental issues, is they don't have any great relationships in the space. And the excuse is that everybody's in a cabal and out to get them. Mm. Perhaps you're not compromising. Perhaps you're not able to have reasonable conversations. I don't know. So I'm willing to entertain the idea of having conversations with y'all, but we got to get through some things first. Yeah.
A little self-care when we're feeling not as activated, maybe, and we can develop that relationship.
And this wasn't even the most stressful thing in the last month for me. So
no. Yeah. I think that was probably just like, there's all the other things that are going on. And then, any little thing can really set off our own process when we're already dealing with so much. So
yeah. All right. Well, I got to run. So I think let's wrap this up. Again, September 23, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. If you want to get a start on your psychedelic education and process, come on over. We'd love to have you. Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists can be found at psychedelictoday.com or psychedeliceducationcenter.com. It's an 8-week program, 47 hours total, hour and a half weekly live education with the teaching team, typically Kyle and I, and more to come. I'm hoping we can announce some Australian dates soon, again, for the next round of that. It's going to be awesome. That's going really well currently.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts, Kyle?
No, just thanks everybody for listening and hopefully being open with this conversation. I know it's a little challenging. So yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Kyle. And we'll see you on the next episode.